Now I'm going to invite our Fishbowl participants to come to the stage. Carol Bradford, Chair of Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery. Marge Clarko, Chief Nursing Officer. Tony Denton, Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of the Clinical Enterprise. Joe Fournier, Chief Human Resources Officer. Denise Grayfelder, Chief Communication Officer. And Sonia Jacobs, Director of Faculty and Leadership Development. Welcome. Last one down, first one question. It's like musical chairs, fishbowl chairs. So Tony Denton, we just talked about the 6 vital strategies. Can you address what you believe we're doing well and what we should be doing better in terms of bringing diversity, equity, and inclusion to our workplace? And if you can, share some of your thoughts on how a focus on these vital strategies can help us become more competitive amongst healthcare providers.
Testing. Last one down, first one up. I think I also drew the short straw on this question. Because there's many different questions in the vital strategies. And I've been asked to try to give a grade on where we are at this point. First, I'll answer the last question, David. Diversity, equity, and inclusivity is critical to the success of our organization. You can think about it in the context of business risk, doing the right thing, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and think about what fairness means in an environment where we're trying to bring thousands of people together to live in a community and to thrive. Sometimes I'm asked, what keeps me up at night? And the answer for the last few months has been pretty consistent. It's where is our workforce for the future going to come from? When you think about the aging of the population, and we are all getting older, think about the legacy of Michigan. Where are we going to get the future physicians, nurses, allied health, clerical professionals? What's in our secret sauce that's going to make them say, yes, I want to be a Wolverine? What's the environment here? And how are we poised to continue a legacy that's going to have to be different in the future than it has been to get us to where we are to date? What are the questions for the next generation as we talk about what are the needs that causes people to say, not only do I want to come here, but I want to stay here? Those are questions that I think about when I think about, is it important? Yes. Other healthcare organizations like us are competing for the same type of resources. Everyone's trying to step up their diversity game because it's important for the success to have the workforce reflect the population of people that they serve, and yet there's a shortage in the supply for the future. So we have to think about what our secret sauce is. What are our aspirations? I believe that some of that comes in what we have said for many years. Excellence is what we thrive for. To be a provider of choice, an educator of choice, an employer of choice. Key word in all of those is choice. And I believe that people do make choices about where they want to work. We want this place to be the first place they think of, but it's not always going to be the case. And the Michigan brand, it's not going to be always what causes people to come here. It's what we stand for. And so it's the values. It's about collaboration, it's about integration, and it's about teamwork. So when I think about those questions, they actually, for me, as I thought about the question, it frames how are we doing now in the ingredients that help to make up provider of choice, educator of choice, and employer of choice, as we think about how we innovate and create something different that is the new legacy for the future. So what about our climate? What kind of enhancing activities do we carry out today that will cause others to say, yes, I want to be a Wolverine? Well, today is a great example. If there's 500 of us here, that's over 10,000 of time, talent, and treasure that came together for a purpose. And it wasn't to stay the same. It's to create something different, to create something new. And that's an incredible investment, but it's foundational for how we think about how we take our climate and improve what we learned last year. How do we improve the smell of the place? That would make a difference for folks that don't work here now or don't study here now. And all of us take that climate control as owners. My conversations with David Brown and Marshall Runge and others has been about a community of owners. Because I think we all have the responsibility for facilitating a climate that's enhancing, that's welcoming, that's receptive for others who want to be here. But it's not easy. The second part of this is about conflict resolution. How do we navigate an environment where we're trying to bring diverse thoughts and ideas together so that people feel valued and respected? There's an emerging trend across the organization called huddles, where we bring teams together on a daily basis or weekly basis to talk about problems and to identify solutions. And that process of teamwork and huddles, it really is about listening to others and taking an idea and building on it to create a solution. How powerful is that? You think about people coming together to work on something that's of a common cause to create a common good. Outward focus. Our responsibility as a provider, educator, employer is that we're trying to provide a service. The fact that we're providing a service, I think, is also pretty instructive for a positive climate, because everybody's coming together to do something for others. Recruitment, hiring, selection. I believe that we have lots of opportunity in all of those domains. 2 months ago, I asked a group of leaders, particularly those that were new, what did it feel like to come to the University of Michigan? Because I had this concern that with all of the recruitment and bringing in new people, they felt like they were being stonewalled because they were new. Everybody that was here, I call them the goldfish. The folks that were new were the green fish. And to a person, they spoke about how hard it was to have their ideas be received because we've always done it that way. So we have to think about, what do we do? How do we mentor? How do we team up the new with the experience to create something that's even more special? When we think about recruitment and creating a culture of inclusivity, to ask ideas because we want to get fresh perspectives from the outside. That also follows to selection, because we want to have retention. What about career advancement? I think that if you look around the room, you see a lot of people who have built their careers here at Michigan. But what's the secret sauce in all of that? I think a lot of people talk to mentorship as being important. Buddying up with someone to be able to partner along the way, to have career ladders, to know where you are on the ladder, for there to be open, transparent conversation. So I think that we're doing well in pockets, but I think we have clear opportunities for improvement. My question to President Schlissel was not a trick question. I think it's a question we have to ask ourselves about where do we want to be, and how are we going to measure it, and how are we going to leave today thinking differently than when we came in. So however we lay out those milestones, I think it's really important for us to understand that we have to measure who we are, what we are, so we can build a new legacy and build a continuing tradition of excellence.
Thank you, Tony. That was a great summary of the importance of the vital strategy. I want to see if anyone else in the Fishbowl has any comments to what Tony said or any additional comments.
Well, since I have the mic, I'll add to that then. Specifically about mentoring.
That was the rule. I wouldn't have given it to you.
But specifically about mentoring, and with faculty development and our leadership development efforts, we have spent quite a bit of time trying to create a culture of mentoring and coaching. And so I'll talk about a few of the programs that we have or efforts we have underway to help mentor. One specifically is if you look at our website, our faculty development website, we have what we call a mentor matrix, where we have faculty members that were vetted with our office as well as with the chairs who have specialties across 13 domains, and one of them is trying to help to create a more inclusive environment. And those individuals are accessible to any of our new faculty when they come on trying to understand the culture and how to build their careers in academic medicine. We also have a new program we just piloted as a result of members of our Rudy Ansbacher Women in Academic Medicine Scholars Program that's called Michigan Mentor Matching. We're piloting right now, there are 50 pairs of mentor-mentee relationships. And those pairs were made up of individuals who expressed interest in mentoring across different domains, and then individuals inputting what their particular needs are. I think that is one way for which we can foster a more diverse, inclusive environment. In addition to that, we have coaching where we are helping to, one, create an environment where leaders understand and can help to coach and develop others, which is, I think, one of the most important ways in which we develop a more inclusive environment. And then creating development opportunities where people can come together with different ideas and perspectives in a safe environment to talk about some of the challenges that they have with respect to creating a diverse and inclusive workforce.
Thank you, Sonia. And from going to the WMC meetings around the country, our faculty development program are truly leaders and best in this, and have done a great job, and people flock to our posters and our presentations when we give them. I'm going to shift the focus a little bit and ask Marge Clarko a question. As we know, nurses are vital to the care of our patients. Let's focus on 3 of the vital strategies that were also discussed earlier: hiring and selection, recruitment, and career advancement. Are there any tactics that nursing is either doing now or considering to create an environment that we can provide the best patient care possible?
Thanks, David. As I was reflecting on these questions, I want to say 2 things in the beginning. One is that our patients and families seek to see themselves in us, as well as our students seek themselves in their faculty, our staff seek to see themselves in the community that they work in. And that, I think, is an overriding principle. And I say that because many years ago, before I came here, so that's more than 30, I was working at a large VA in Ohio. And we were doing actually some work on diversity and inclusion. And we had an African-American psychologist join us from the Hines VA in Chicago. And he was telling a personal story, and he mentioned and he asked us to imagine that we were on the operating table, being the patient, and right before we were going under, we looked around us and we didn't see anyone that looked like us. That was his experience. I will never forget that image because I don't have that experience. I probably will never have that experience. But many of our patients do. And so everything that we do needs to work toward developing a diverse community that reflects the patients and families that we serve. The other principle, if you will, it's not really a principle, but I was thinking that whatever we do it requires deliberate action and intention. And I'll say a little bit more about that. So I'll start answering the questions now. I'm going to talk about recruitment. Nursing does a lot of recruitment, hundreds and hundreds of nurses each year. And we now actually recruit for our physician assistant colleagues as well. And we do many things. We attend over 25 national and regional local events to recruit a diverse applicant pool. We have career fairs. We just had one a few weeks ago with almost 370 people attending. And we have what we call a career launch every year in January, where we invite senior students from the 55 nursing schools across Michigan and Ohio to join us for a day of development. So in terms of what we're doing to increase our applicant pool related to recruitment, we are, of course, focusing on particular specialized events. So for instance, the National Society for Hispanic Nurses will be there. We'll be at the Academy of Medical Surgical Nurses, which is a very diverse population. For PAs, we're joining the National Army PA, or Society for Army PAs, now recruiting more veterans into PA work. So we go to more diverse populations, and we need to do more of that. But I'll tell you a little bit about Career Fair. We've done it for 8 years. We have more than 200 students that join us for a Saturday across the entire state. And this year, I'm there every year, and this year I was looking around the audience to see how diverse it was. And it wasn't very diverse. And I started thinking about that because I hadn't done it before. I hadn't looked. I hadn't had a deliberate intention to look. But I did, and I noticed it wasn't very diverse, and I was talking to the planners. And we invite all schools equally. You know, we send the information to the same place in all schools. But we talked about what could we do differently next year. You know, let's find out in each school where their Office of Multicultural Affairs is, or people to connect to differently, to invite differently to our events. There was a group of African American students, and I was talking to them at the end, and they were very excited, as they all are, at the end of career launch, about what they experienced. But I was asking them how it was for them, and they loved it, but they said, you know, I never thought of coming to U of M. I never thought of coming, but maybe I will now. That's what we have to cultivate. We have to think about better ways of recruiting, of helping people join us and helping people find out about us in terms of welcoming them. In terms of hiring and selection, of course, the applicant pool is critical, so recruitment is critical. So the more that we think about how we invite more diverse populations to us, the better, and that's one of the strategies that we will be working on in the coming year. In December, Denise Williams actually worked with us as a small leadership dinner that we had around unconscious bias in hiring. And it was a very brief session, because it was just a dinner. But it was extremely powerful, because even in that short time, we had to ask ourselves questions and reflect on situations that we never reflected on before. And so it really increased our awareness, and that's why in January, I looked at the room in Career Launch, because I had my awareness increased about at least looking. So this work in unconscious bias is very, very powerful, and we will be exploring many more ways and opportunities to do that in our ongoing leadership development courses that we have in nursing and our career advancement for our staff nurses. Both that and cultural competencies we're going to move forward in. So hiring and selection and really uncovering unconscious bias is really powerful, and we've just started that journey. So we need to do much more work on that. In terms of career advancement, we have many developmental opportunities in nursing and across the health system, as you know. And we need to, again, more deliberately plan in the curriculum these competencies around unconscious bias, around cultural competencies. We really need to look at the way we're advancing our nurses in our professional development framework and our role-specific advancement models, in our leadership development programs. We need to reflect deliberately and place in deliberate ways content and experience to develop ourselves. So those are the things that we've done, but mostly what we're going to do.
Great. Thank you very much, March. You mentioned a lot of excellent points, talking about pipeline programs, engagement, awareness, being deliberate in the planning, questioning the planning committees and opening their eyes to the diversity of the constituency. I was wondering if anyone else had any comments or experiences along those same lines. Okay.
I think it's important, one, as it relates to creating a diverse and inclusive environment. From a leadership development perspective, we have to ensure that our leaders understand what's expected of them. And one of the ways in which we've been doing that is through the development of our leadership competency model, and really trying to focus on those competencies that will help us create that kind of environment. And those are foundational to all of our leadership development programs. So competencies like collaborates and builds inclusive relationships, are we coaching and developing people, and then also, do we foster diverse teams? And then when we think about the way in which we are developing our leaders, so in many of our programs, the unconscious bias is very important in understanding and helping to educate leaders on the importance and the value of having a diverse team. And in addition to that, helping our leaders understand how do we then communicate, so making sure we're communicating or assessing our communication styles so that we can listen and be heard, or listen to the diverse perspectives. And then the coaching. How are we really helping to develop our diverse workforce, and helping or equipping our leaders with managing the conflicts that are inevitable, in any kind of situation, but being able to harness those conflicts and the perspectives, because what that does is spurs innovation and improvement. And so we have an ongoing responsibility to help to develop the competencies of our leaders so that we can sustain, we can recruit, we can select, and we can promote diverse talent.
Great.
I wanted to also speak to the value of unconscious bias training. It's important because it's unconscious. You don't realize you have it. So David Brown, who is in the Department of Otolaryngology, encouraged us to put this training in recently as part of our residency selection training. And the session was so eye-opening and remarkable that I also encouraged unconscious bias training to be a part of a search committee and all the chair search committees that are open right now. And I think that it's very, very eye-opening. It's not simple. It's something like how many leadership positions one has already had. So if we only choose leaders for certain roles that have already been leaders, then the door might not ever be open to certain individuals from diverse backgrounds. And the other thing we talked a lot about recruitment strategies. Equally vital is retention strategies. We have to make sure our trainees, our students, our staff, and our faculty have a voice. We have to let and allow them to change us. As an example, David, I'm proud to have recruited back to Michigan, and was a privilege to train David Brown. But he has impacted my thinking on strategies for diversity, inclusion, and equity. And so our staff, trainees, faculty really need to have a voice in changing and implementing these vital behaviors in our organization moving forward.
Thank you. And since you have the mic, I'm going to ask you for a little bit more, since I know your department well, because I'm a member of it. I know that otolaryngology has a long history of racial diversity. We've arguably trained the highest number of African American otolaryngologists in the country, have been trained here at the University of Michigan. This started with Chuck Krause, who was chair two before Dr. Bradford. Since Carol Bradford has been chair, we've also enjoyed gender parity. 50% of our residents are women, and I don't know if there's another otolaryngology department in the country that can claim that, and that's especially important for being a surgical field. So I have a three-part question. Some of them you've answered. How did otolaryngology department achieve this? Were there any recruitment and climate-enhancing skills that helped over the years, even maybe before you were there? And having this diversity in otolaryngology, how has that affected the quality of care for our patients?
So thank you for the invitation to participate. And I reflected. I just traveled back and forth to Rome, so that's a long flight. I didn't take any notes, but I reflected a lot on this issue. And what I came upon was that the department under Chuck Krause's leadership, he completed his term as chair in 1992, was intentional about valuing diversity, inclusion, and equity. And he did so by creating, sort of almost well ahead of its time, I would argue, a diversity committee that was our forum that exists to this day for conversation and dialogue and value of these values. And so I'll tell you a couple of stories, because I think stories tell a lot. So when I was a medical student here, I'm a goldfish, I've been here forever. Haven't heard that term before, but I'll use it again. I was told as a student here that the Department of Otolaryngology at the University of Michigan didn't select women to join its training program. That was really disappointing, because it was and is the top public training program in the land, and I really wanted to come to the University of Michigan. And despite my career counselors telling me that Michigan didn't accept women, I was fortunate to match into this training program. And when you talk about the patient entering the operating room with nobody that looks like them, I can tell you that my training and junior faculty years were filled with not having any other women trainees or any other women faculty. And in fact, early on, you'd go to faculty dinners and it would literally be 20 men and myself. And so I got it, I understood it early on, and I think you do need to have some groundbreakers before the operating rooms will look like the patients that they serve. So what is the value of diversity and inclusion and equity in our organization? And I'm going to also tell a story. We had the privilege of training Lamont Jones. He was a medical student here. And he wanted to pursue otolaryngology, and we provided mentorship and guidance and ended up matching Lamont Jones into our training program. Lamont is a bright African American male from inner city Detroit. He came from a very underprivileged background. And what he taught us is the value of serving underprivileged communities and how important it was to train staff, students, trainees, and our own faculty in this initiative. And so he got us involved in the Hope Clinic, where our staff, trainees, faculty went to the Hope Clinic and served their ear, nose, and throat needs. We then realized we didn't have all the equipment. We're a surgical subspecialty. We need scopes and all this stuff that wasn't in the Hope Clinic. And so we approached our health system and asked for permission to conduct a Hope Clinic on Saturday mornings, to open our doors to serve underserved patients in our community that needed ear, nose, and throat care. We partnered actually with departments of plastic surgery to do skin checks and dermatology, and we provide audiology care. What's fascinating about it is a staff member once told me how valuable it was to them because it helped them understand to a greater degree what a difference we can make in the community. And it was more palpable somehow when no bills were being paid, no money was happening. We were just there because we wanted to serve our communities. I think our trainees understand the value of this moving forward. And Lamont Jones is vice chair at Henry Ford's Department of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery. I had the privilege of serving with him on a recent Kenya medical mission trip. So he's really one of our many proud trainees who are doing extraordinary things and changing really the way we teach, the way we practice, and the way we create the future through scholarship. So recruitment strategies, finally, it's interesting in that it's not obvious sometimes how to create a more diverse, inclusive workforce. And I think you also have to be intentional about that. Otolaryngology is one of the least diverse surgical subspecialties in the country. That's a fact. And one of the ways to get into training programs is to do an away rotation. And so we recognize that some students from less privileged backgrounds, and this is David's work, all I did was offer funding, and of course I said yes. Is we need to get these students here so that we can have them shadow us and work with us for a month, because then we'll be more likely to match students from diverse backgrounds. And so that strategy we've just launched, and that's been very effective. And we are very active in our national organization, Society of University Otolaryngologists, in promoting health equity, inclusion, and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you. And the program Carol Bradford alluded to was a pilot program last year that we're starting more formally this year. We had 5 people come as visiting students in health equity and inclusion. They all had to give presentations or scholarly work around health equity and inclusion. 2 got interviews and they both matched. There were a couple, one in otolaryngology and one in OBGYN. They both came here and did exceptional work, and we realized what amazing talent we had out there who we would have never have seen if they didn't spend the time here. So thank you to Tim Johnson and Carol Bradford for that. I'd like to go to Joe Fournier. As you know, with your years in HR, winning organizations put a premium on their talent development and employee engagement at all levels of the organization. These are hallmarks of diverse, equitable, and inclusive organizations and good places to work. Organizations that excel in talent development and employee engagement tend to be the types of places that today's workers want to be at, something that Tony alluded to earlier. I have a 3-part question for you. Because HR is such a big part, we have 28,000 staff here, that's why I give them a big question. How do the diversity, equity, and inclusion vital strategies align with HR's goals? Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important for our workforce? And how, this is the hardest question, do we operationalize this? Yes, and you have 5 minutes. Sorry.
So first I want to be clear about why we're doing this. Can't hear you. Let's talk about why we're doing this first. The Office of Health Equity and Inclusion Vital Strategies and the Human Resources Strategies, or our people strategy for the organization, are really enabling strategies for our academic medical centers goals. If we really want to achieve excellence or be the best in all 3 parts of our mission, patient care, medical education, and research, these are the strategies that we need to deploy to do that. Our HR strategy at a very high level is quite simple. We want to attract, inspire, and retain the most outstanding people in medicine, education, and research. This comes down to really two things. The first is talent, and the second, I think, is engagement or high-performing teams. So let's talk about talent first. When we talk about diversity or inclusivity, that means that we really understand how the most talented people add value to this organization. And if you think about that for a minute, it means we source the best talent who bring the best perspectives, and we appreciate those perspectives, and we include them in our teams every day to get the best results for our organization. Let's talk about high-performing or engaged teams. Think about the best team that you were ever on. Might be the one you're on now, might be the one you were on years ago, but it was the one where everyone felt included and everyone made a contribution. Everyone looked at each other at the end and was proud of what they did. I think back to a very, very simple example of what that means to me. I was in the Air Force for years, and when we were training, we used to have to carry this log above our heads, about 5 or 6 of us, really, really heavy. The people who were the tallest, who could reach the highest, could carry that log. Those of us who were shorter couldn't reach the top of it. So if we went by that way, that would mean that the tallest people carried it for everyone. But what we had to do for the entire team to hold it the longest was lower it so that the tallest people lowered it a little and the shortest people could reach up to the top so that we could all carry it together for the longest. You'd be amazed that teams had difficulty learning this. There were a lot of teams that fell out quickly. The teams that learned how to do this the best were the ones that lasted the longest and won. It happened to be one of the teams that I was on because we learned that right away. High-performing teams are the ones that engage everyone in the work. Let's talk about engagement for a minute. How do you define engagement? Certainly not satisfaction. We could have a lot of very satisfied, low-performing people here, right? Happy but not doing much. Right? Engagement means we all come to work every day to do our very best, and we add just that much more because we're engaged in our work. And having an inclusive team drives the highest engaged team. Highly engaged teams get us the best performance for our patients, for our students. It also creates better opportunities with our medical research programs. So let me move on to part 2 of that question if we have time. This is a 3-part question. Why is diversity important to the workforce, equity, and inclusion? I think it's the foundation of us thriving in the future. We've talked about what does success look like in the next 5 years. As our talent market changes, as the labor market changes all outside of this university, as we have more age diversity than we've ever had, 5 generations of people working together, 5 now. We will need to source the very best people to do the work. When they get here, to keep them and to perform at the highest level, we'll need to do what we're doing today, which is the first step. It's building competency and awareness of some of the most important issues that we have to deal with over the next 5 years, and really building, as Sonia mentioned, that competency into our leaders so that we know how to empower, to remove roadblocks, and to really move this forward for us as an organization. And how do we operationalize it? I think this is cut out. Thank you. This is step 1. We talk about what the strategy is, but you know what's better than strategy? It's actually implementing it. That's the hard part, and that starts today. So we're going to build competency and awareness around these issues so that we can start to talk about what our work plans should be. As I said, HR and Office of Health Equity and Inclusion are enabling functions for the work that we're here to do. We have the expertise and the thinking and the resources to do this. But the bottom line is we all own it. There is not one person in this room who doesn't own it. We're the stewards for the organization here. And so what that means is you build your work plans as we put key performance indicators and metrics to measure how we're performing together. We will be there partnered with you every step of the way.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Joe. I want to give the last question to Denise Grayfelder. You know, the block M goes far and wide, longa et late. I took Latin in high school, and that's one of the two phrases I remember. And so branding's important. How can prioritizing and operationalizing in the last few minutes of this Fishbowl, the vital strategies, help us to enhance our reputation and our brand?
Okay, thanks, David. Yeah, I actually saw the Block M in Tunisia one day, in Tunis, which kind of blew my mind. Made me feel good, though, actually, as somebody who's paid a whole lot of out-of-state tuition, that it goes far and wide. So, I think, first of all, let's talk about terms. I have two simple definitions. For branding is what people say about you when you're not in the room. I'll slow it down. Branding is what people say about you when you're not in the room. It's very simple. And reputation is collective judgments. It's what people think they know about you, their collective judgments. And both of these, in my mind, actually have to force us to think externally. I thought I was a goldfish, but I guess I'm a greenfish, Tony, having been here a little over 2 years, but, you know, many, many decades ago I was here. And I think one of the things is really helpful to us in dealing with three of the vital strategies, in particular, the inclusion, not all the non-hiring ones, so the other three. And are they still up there? You guys can look for yourself. But I think is really to think about what our stakeholders think about us and to always have that in mind. And oftentimes we're very inwardly focused. And when you worry about brand and reputation, you have to worry about my cousin, who is 20 years older than me, and I can't get him to get his eye care at Kellogg if I held a gun to his head. And he does stupid things and goes and gets glaucoma surgery at the corner drugstore or whatever. And they screw him up, and then he says, how do I get this fixed? Because he doesn't see, as Marge says, people from his background that look like him that he feels like he can trust. So that says to me, when you come here, I need to figure out a way to help you be heard, to help you be listened to, and to help your differing ideas actually be taken into consideration. I've been sort of an outsider my whole life, and it doesn't bother me anymore, but guess what, guys? It bothers my kids. They don't, as 25 and 23, they don't want to work for a place where they have to fight to be heard, where they have to fight to have their opinions considered, where they have to fight to have their differences recognized. And so then that says to me, and I'm looking dead at Chelsea and Jennifer in my department, is that we, the three of us and all the other people in our department, have to create a department where that doesn't happen. Where my kids and your kids and everybody else's kids can feel like their differences are valued, their differences are listened to, and frankly, more importantly, their differences are sought out. That means you solve problems differently, perhaps. 50% of me is going to tell you immediately what I think of you. That's the Jamaican side. The other 50% is going to be genteel and calm, but you know, Marshall never sees that side because my mother was not the dominant one. My dad was the Jamaican one. It means that you have to understand where people bring to the workplace, whether they're, you know, black, white, purple, Arab, Muslim, Palestinian, whatever, and actually say to them, so what does it mean from your perspective? What does this how would you solve this problem? I think we get too hung up sometimes in any institutions in doing things the way we've always done them. And in fact, the way we've always done them isn't going to work for tomorrow. So that's kind of my first observation. My second observation is what are we going to do to keep people here? Because the world is changing very fast, as Tony says, and we all know that young people are not going to stay as long as most of us did in any job. They're going to move a lot more. So how are we making those environments conducive to those young people to want to stay? The third thing I guess I would close with, where's my sign guy? How many minutes do I have? Oh, thanks.
We don't have a second sign.
Yeah, I noticed that, and some people went on a whole lot longer with no sign.
We're going to give you some time. Equity, time, equity. Right here.
I love that. Thank you, David. Good idea. And I guess I would just close with, when we get people into the workplace and we actually have these diverse teams, can we create work that builds upon their experiences? I was struck by an experience I had myself, and I did some quick research for us. A group called Diversity, Inc. does an annual rating of best places for diverse climates. And in healthcare, who do you think is number one from 2015? Henry Ford Hospital. Henry Ford Hospital. What's that, 38 miles due east of here, or something like that? So what is Henry Ford Hospital doing that we're not doing? How do we learn from that? Second was Mayo Clinic. Third was Cleveland Clinic. Fourth is North Shore. And fifth is Mount Sinai. Now, some of them have advantages being in New York City, one of them at least, being in New York City, but that can't be the only thing. So in closing, I guess I would say I spent a very long amount of my time in AT&T, and we always, and it's different because it is a corporation, but it's also the same in that they're managing and leading people. And in managing and leading people, we always, from the top down, from the CEO down, the door was always open for someone who had a different idea. And he literally, the CEO, made time on his calendar every month for anybody that wanted to get on his calendar. And all you had to say was it was diversity related. Now, this was AT&T a long time ago. I have no clue what they're up to, but I can tell you on their rankings, they're still number 7 in diverse, a good place to work as a diverse employer, along with Procter & Gamble and Johnson & Johnson, who have been on those lists forever, as long as I've been working in this field. So there's some lessons, I think, learned from some of these companies. So maybe we can also, in embracing this notion, look outside of ourselves a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank the entire Fishbowl panel. I know that we could have done this for another hour or so, and I know that many of you may have some questions to different participants or speakers, and those cards that are on the table, they're color-coded for each segment of the agenda. You can use that to ask questions or add comments and put them in the box, and we'll answer them on our website, which will give you the address later. I want one more housekeeping thing as our Fishbowl people exit, is if there's a table where there's a seat next to you, please raise your hand so we can sit people, please. Raise your hand if there's seats next to you so we can know. Thank you. We're going to share one more story, and then I'm going to introduce Scott Page very quickly.
I've recently had some health issues, and I actually had to go to the ED. I was very surprised to see that sexual orientation is still not being considered on the intake paperwork. I mean, there are questions relating to sexual activity and pregnancy with no appropriate option to choose for someone who is gay or lesbian. Oh, and another thing, it was actually a male friend of mine that brought me to the ED. When the doctor came in, he automatically assumed my friend was my husband. Medical staff needs to be more educated about how to properly address people. He could have simply asked my friend who he was, or asked me who I had with me. These may not be drastic issues, but they don't promote inclusion of LGBT